Today we are so excited to be joined by Dr Joseph John Morrow, the current Lord Lyon King of Arms, the head of the court of the Lord Lyon. The court was established over 400 years ago and is the heraldic authority for Scotland. One of their greatest responsibilities is deciding upon and granting titles of Clan Chiefship. We are really looking forward to hearing Joseph's heraldry story. So Joseph, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you here. Why don't you start by telling our viewers who may not know what the court of the Lord Lyon is?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for giving the opportunity to speak to your viewers, but also to say that I'm very excited that in fact other people are excited to meet me, which is always a wonderful thing to do. But the court of the Lord Lyon is the last heraldic court to function properly and regularly in the whole world. It's a very strong Scottish tradition, and it was established under Acts of Parliament in the 17th century and beyond that into the 16th century, but our particular modern approach has been taken from the Act of the 17th century. And as Lord Lyon, I am the executive head of all heraldic activity in Scotland, and I also am in charge of the state ceremonial in Scotland. And my advice is sought on a number of issues, including that to do with clans.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. It's a lot of responsibility. So how did you first become the Lord Lyon? Did you have to have any specific qualifications for the role?
Well, you do. You must be a lawyer, and by being a lawyer, you have to be either a solicitor or an advocate, or a solicitor advocate, which is a hybrid, but they're the professional categories of people who can become the Lord Lyon. I was previously a solicitor, then I was an advocate, and I became a Queen's Counsel. And it was during the period that I was an advocate that I applied for the post of Lord Lyon and was appointed in February 2014.
Oh wow, okay, so there is quite a lot to it then to be chosen. Have you always been interested in heraldry?
Absolutely. I mean, I've described myself as being a student of heraldry for decades. Probably now nearly, believe it or not, it's coming up to 6 decades of interest. My interest was first fostered when I was taken to church as a young boy. And I used to have to listen to very long, tedious sermons, as they appeared to me. But maybe nowadays I seem to talk long and tediously to people. And when I was listening to these sermons, my mind would go to the different coats of arms that were in the church that I attended as a wee boy. And I would dream about what they meant and who they were associated with, and what, if they were associated with battles and with the ideas of knights and tournaments. And it was a distraction. And from that very little gem of boredom, basically, and moving towards the idea of actually trying to find out what coats of arms were all about, over really 6 decades, I've grown in knowledge of it, and it's still not stopped.
Yeah.
Anyone who tells you that they're an expert in heraldry is actually, in my view, got it wrong. It's a science that continues to grow in knowledge, and it doesn't stay static in the past. It's something that is moved into contemporary times. For example, last night I was very fortunate to actually join an online lecture on Hungarian nobility and their heraldry. Wow. I knew nothing about it until I was able to share in that lecture. So there is a great worldwide tradition of heraldry, which I'm very keen not only to continue to study, but to make relevant for this generation here in Scotland and beyond today.
Yeah, wow, that's so interesting, isn't it? So I can imagine you must be very busy as Lord Lyon. What do your responsibilities include?
Well, they include granting of new coats of arms to individuals or organisations that apply, and we get a fair stream of those throughout the year, and we can give arms to an individual who may want to recognise where he is within his family, and we also can grant arms to organisations that have a want for a corporate image through a coat of arms. The example I always give, and it is just an example, is in that field, is that of the Harris Tweed. Association. They have the orb. It's well known, and everybody knows if you've got an orb in your inside pocket as a gentleman, you've got a Harris tweed jacket on. So these symbols become much more about the organisation and about their identity than simply just the symbols themselves. Equally, that applies to individuals and their link and place within a family. Scottish heraldry is been described, at least by some of my predecessors, as the garden of Scottish history. And what they mean is if you go and look at all the charges and the colours in the heraldry, it will tell you a little bit about the history of the individual or the institution, and it brings alive what they're all about.
Wow, that's so interesting. So can anyone apply to have a coat of arms, or is there rules around that?
There are rules, but the rules are really related to jurisdiction. As you can imagine, I'm Lord Lyon, King of Arms, but my jurisdiction stops in Scotland, or those of Scottish descent. So it would be inappropriate for me to actually grant arms to an Englishman, because they have their own authority. However, if it's an Englishman with Scottish descent and he can prove it, then I might be able to take jurisdiction. So in essence, I can take jurisdiction from anyone who is of Scottish origin or can make that connection to me, or is a Scottish organisation or has connections with Scotland as an organisation. That's the first and probably the most significant hurdle, the one of jurisdiction. Once jurisdiction's established, there's a test to see if you're a well-deserving and virtuous person. Now, I'm the judge of that, so you've got to be very careful. And that's actually about bearing in mind that a coat of arms is given by the Lord Lyon under the authority of the Queen. We need to make sure it's to proper people and proper organisations that actually receive it. But in general terms, it's open to all of those of Scottish descent or connection.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting to learn. So, can you tell us about the significance of your official Lord Lyon attire?
Well, the attire is very, very ancient in its origin. The office, as I've said, goes back before the Union of the Crowns in Scotland, and there's a bit of dispute when the first records of the Lord Lyon actually were put into the papers of Scottish history, but around about the early 14th century there's mentions of it. But the idea of the Lord Lyon goes back to the High Shericki, or the poet who recited the generations of the King of Scots before he was actually inaugurated. So there's a lot of mystical side from the Celtic period as well. Over the years, the uniforms have emerged in a way which represented the link of the Lord Lyon to the crown. And so at one time, the tabard, which is the over or the surcoat that's worn over the uniform, so that you could be identified, would only have the lion rampant on it, because that was the royal arms of Scotland. Today, we have quarters, because we're the Lord Lyon King of Arms of Her Majesty, the Queen, and they have two parts of them which are the lion rampant, one for the English three lions and one for the Harp of Ireland, representing the United Kingdom. But in Scotland, there are two parts of the quartering, as it's called, 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters. There's two parts of that are in the Scottish Royal Arms to show that we're actually Scottish officers at arms.
What an interesting story. Can you explain to our viewers what is included in the process of confirming claims to chiefships?
Okay, this is quite a complicated subject, and so I will try to be as brief as I can, and also I will try to be as general as I can, because the difficulty with this, the more specific you become on it, the more people raise questions and hold you to what you've said. So I'm not going to be held to ransom on this. But in essence, if a chief, and most of the chiefs have recorded arms in the register, and they become known as the chief of the name and arms of the clan or family. And when the succession needs to be passed on, usually through death, then the next chief matriculates the arms of the chief who has just died generally, and becomes the chief of the name and arms of that particular clan and family. And that's done by way of a petition to the Lord Lyon's court, and the Lord Lyon issues an interlocutor. Now, in that the Lord Lyon does that, he interpones authority into the succession of the chief. It gives a sort of formal authority to the next generation of chiefs. So that's the first method that we use. And that's done a lot. And it's usually father to son. But it doesn't have to be father to son, because the clan law is governed by old Celtic law, and there was always an ability to pass to women as well, and that's why we have some women chiefs, and some excellent women chiefs, and just so that the men are not upset, excellent men chiefs as well, but there are some excellent women chiefs. There is another method where the clan chief has kind of, his succession has died out, and nobody can find out who the claimant is, and that's because of history. That's because of people moving away to different parts of the world. And there is a process that the Lord Lyon can assist in, which is to interpone and to set up under a warrant a family convention. And that family convention gathers together all of the clan members that they can. And it's got to be fair, it's got to be transparent, it's got to be well advertised. And they decide they would like to get someone to be the commander of the clan in the absence of not being able to find a chief. Now that commander has two functions. One is to seek for a genealogical chief. So he's not there to become chief, he's there to look to see if the chiefly line is extinguished, or if they can't find someone to take it up who's a blood relative, basically, of the chiefship. And the second thing is that he's there to rally and provide leadership to the clan, to give it a sense of identity and direction. And that family convention method is used where the chief can't be found and there's no successor to the chiefship. And there is a number of examples where that's worked very well. The Gun clan, for example, had a commander for decades, and he was eventually, with the consent of the clan itself, I interposed authority and granted him the arms, the chiefly arms and name of Gun, and he becomes the chief of the Guns. And that gives a sense of continuity, but it's also a sense that what I'm doing is not appointing the chief, I'm placing authority and interponing authority into a choice that the chief has made. However, people should know that while I think it's a good process, it's a process of discernment that requires time to pass. So the appointment of a commander is 5 years at a time, and I wouldn't be, in general terms, expecting someone to come back after 5 years and ask to be chief. It's something that requires a kind of maturing and a relationship between the commander and the actual clan, but it also requires me to be satisfied that there is no genealogical heir can be found to the chiefship.
So you would only be granting the commander chiefship once they'd really looked.
And when a good bit of time has passed, and that the clan found him acceptable.
As a leader.
As a leader, and there was a sense of coherence in the clan that this was the direction they wanted to go. And those timescales are not short. It's not an instant fix.
No, definitely not.
It's probably easier to look for a genealogical chief. And that's been successful on a number of occasions. The Buchanan chiefship, for example, after a proof before me, which is a formal case in court, I was satisfied that the man who is now the chief actually had proved his case.
You've been the Lord Lyon since 2014, but what has been your greatest achievement since stepping into the role?
Achievements are for others to talk about, but one of the things that I'm most interested in developing is to actually to take the Court of the Lord Lyon out and make it relevant in modern communities. So we do a lot of activity, I do a lot of personal activity in speaking to groups about the work, meeting individuals, engaging with young people, engaging with old people, and just sort of generally promoting the work.
Mm-hmm.
One of the examples of that could be captured in our community flag project. If I get this right, we have an honorary vexillologist who's a young man who's just become Marchment Pursuant, and he promotes community flags. And I register them. That's one of the tasks of Lord Lyon, because a flag is seen as part of the ensign memorial of Scottish heraldry.
Right.
And the idea there is that while I have complete discretion on what it should be, I've encouraged the use of a competition to involve people.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had a competition, for example, for a flag for Caithness. Over 350 people applied.
Oh wow.
And if my memory serves me, there were people all the way from Brazil to Wick who put in applications.
Oh, that's so cool.
So it engages in that particular aspect of public engagement, and that's probably one of the things that I think is my major kind of contribution and the major thing I would want to develop.
Yeah.
In another way, while it's very slow, I've spent a lot of time trying to modernise the system and to make it much more relevant. Now, the first question I was asked was how do I display if a same-sex couple who are married have arms each, how are they displayed on a new set of arms?
Yeah.
Well, there is rules about what side the female arm's on and what side the male arm's going. But that's not a question that can be easily answered in a same-sex couple, and it's probably not an appropriate question to ask anyway nowadays. And so I had to deal with that kind of modernisation. And the view I took was they can tell me what they want, and I'll be happy to go along with that, because that's a matter for the couple, not a matter for me. So there are modern questions that come up that need to be addressed. And that was in the first week of my office in 2014.
Oh, really?
I was asked that question.
Oh, so you had to be quick on your feet with that.
Well, I had to be very quick on, well, not quick on my feet, I had to
But
at least be time to think about it.
Yeah. You have degrees in both theology and law, and you have a background in mental health law. Do you feel like this experience has helped you within your role as Lord Lyon?
Absolutely. The law is crucial to the understanding of the role of Lord Lyon, because a lot of the work is actually legally driven. And as I said earlier, heraldry is the last in Scotland is the last in Scotland is it's the last area which is retained in law in the whole world. So it's a part of the legal system, and the Court of the Lord Lyon is part of the legal system. The theology is interesting because I have a very solid belief myself, but it's not one that I would want to impose on someone. But the symbolisms that are given through religion are reflected in some of the activities we do in heraldry, and the whole idea of symbolism and ideas are behind that. As for the mental health law, and it's something I don't often talk about, because I think it's such a tragedy for those who have to have mental health law applied to them, that it's really such a personal thing. And I'm of the view that that those who are in the position of suffering from mental health issues are suffering, and it is really a tragedy for their lives and for their families, so they require support. What it did do for me was give me an absolute understanding of the range of society and what are the different issues about the ranges in society. And both the combination of law, theology and mental health law has given me, I think, insights on how to relate to people in a positive and active way that that would encourage me to actually support them. I have a friend, well, at least an old friend and colleague, who is a psychiatrist, and he once said to me when I was mouthing off about something, and I do mouth off about something because I'm not sometimes the easiest of persons, despite the way I kind of chat away. He said, "Joe, if you can't say anything nice about somebody, shut up." And I think that's right. You should, in essence, try to affirm people. So I think I learned from the work in the mental health law to try to affirm and support people where they are, even though you might have things that you have to do that will cut across their own kind of nature and personhood. So it's a good combination for me.
Yeah.
Good combination.
Yeah, it's a good background to have to go into this role.
But I'm at the end of it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of coming up to the latter part of my professional life,
Right.
and probably past my sell-by date in many ways. So it's time for it'll be time for me to think about how do we move on, and how do you grow, and how do you take things to the next stage, and actually how do you encourage the next generation to take up some of these issues.
Yeah, definitely. We believe we have a picture of you holding our tartan Ted at Fergus Highland Games in 2019. So during your role, have you had many opportunities to travel abroad to represent the court?
Yeah, it's a hard life being the Lord Lyon. A very hard life indeed. You have to travel abroad and to do some things that are actually fantastic. And my attendance at the Fergus Highland Games was one of the highlights before the restrictions came into place that I took part in. I did hold the tartan Ted, and I did have a great time at the Fergus Games. The Canadians were so welcoming, but the other aspect about it was that they engage with Scottish life. And what came through from the Games and all its activities, from with the bands to the tug-of-wars to the reenactments, was a real sense of what it meant to hold the values of being a Scot. So, and these values are one of equality, hard work, and looking forward, and kind of, being the best you can. And that came through in the Games. So I do travel on it. I've been away to Australia doing a lecture course as Lord Lyon. I've been at a number of Highland Games in North America, and I've had an opportunity to actually share some of the experiences I have here in Scotland with the Highland Games in these different areas. The bit I enjoy most is that they have often what's called the clan and family village, and that allows every clan or family that wants to set up a stall. And it is my usual practice to go around every one of those stalls and just sit and spend a bit of time and hear the family stories that have taken place with, for example, the McGregors, but the McGregors of North Carolina instead of the McGregors from Scotland. And so it gives an opportunity for me to kind of share with the Scottish diaspora what it means to be part of the living Scotland today.
Yeah, and they're so enthusiastic as well at the Highland Games as well. It's really nice to see.
Absolutely, it's just an amazing thing to see how they engage and make sure that these activities are held up as kind of icons of what they see the living Scotland to be in their own communities.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm very privileged this coming year, it all being well, I'm going to be delivering the immortal memory to Robert Burns at the 150th anniversary of the New York Burns Club. And I'm really looking forward to that, and I see that as a great honour to be able to do that, to represent our national bard in a toast to such a prestigious Burns Club.
No, that'll be really amazing. There's a real trend just now for exploring your roots and heritage, and therefore more interest in Scottish heritage. Do you see this continuing, and do you feel it has an effect on your role?
Yes, I mean, I think it's going to continue, and I think it will continue because people are constantly searching for who they are. And it's not just a question about our roots genealogically or our family history, it's about where do we come from, what are the values. For example, in that lecture I talked a bit earlier about on Hungarian nobility that I listened to last night, there was bits and pieces that I could hook an eye into for understanding of how things developed here in the same period. They were talking primarily about the 16th and 17th century. So you see a commonality to how things have developed. So I see that search for identity to be very important. And I think that sense and discovery of identity and the values behind that identity give you an individual confidence, and that's why I don't see this going away.
Yeah, definitely. No, I definitely see it continuing. Obviously, you have to remain impartial between each of the different clans, but are you connected to a particular clan yourself?
I have connections to a few clans, but I do keep independent.
Yeah.
For example, I only wear my local county tartan when I go anywhere, which is the Angus tartan, and that's because I live there.
Yeah.
But my grandmother, was a Nicholson from Skye,
right.
And so I have an association with her maternally, and there are other bits of my family that have connections with the clans themselves. But remember that clans were never closed shops.
No.
You could go under the protection of a chief anytime the chief would allow you to do it. So there is a kind of open approach to clan life that sometimes is misunderstood. It's not a closed shop.
Yeah.
It's about being under the leadership and protection of a chief and having the value and the history of that particular group of people.
So have you done a lot of research into your family tree?
There is research. I haven't personally done anything into my
okay.
family tree, but I had a relative in my granny's generation who did some research and traced as far as they could family trees back on my maternal side.
Right.
On my paternal side, it looks like there was some Irish connections there, and these have not been bottomed out, but it won't be difficult to do if I ever have the time to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that my younger brother appears to be a bit more interested in family history than our individual family history than I might have actually shown.
Yeah.
But it's a project if when I retire to
Yeah.
take it up.
Definitely need to have the time to commit to it, don't you? So, being Scottish yourself, how did you celebrate your Scottish heritage growing up?
In lots of ways. I mean, I certainly always had the ability. We always had the ability to wear the kilt from wee boys, so it was a celebration of that. We always kept Hogmanay, which is a great Scottish connection, and had family parties at that particular time. I also think that my own family was had a very strong female dynastic tone to it. My mother was one of 5 sisters.
Oh, wow.
and they all kind of brought together the family. So that concept of family, which I think is very Scottish, came together. But from my father, I got real senses of what I think are important values about being on the level with people, straightforward and using common sense, about hard work. And he expected us to take our share in any hard work that would go around. But also, my father valued intellectual capacity, and so he encouraged us to kind of work away at school, and that was something I still have a sense of. So that's how I've celebrated my Scottish heritage. And I suppose the last one, that kind of intellectual search, is part of where we come from in terms of the Scottish Enlightenment, to trying to learn more about who we are, and what the world's about, and to move that forward.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I'm a lover of Robert Burns, and I make no bones about that. I'm very proud to be an honorary member of the Irvine Burns Club and the Greenock Burns Club, which are very prestigious Burns clubs to be made honorary members of. And I enjoy the celebration of Scottish culture through Robert Burns and through a number of other of our poets and writers.
Finally, we ask everyone this question: do you have a favourite tartan?
I do, which is probably the Angus County tartan, because that's where I live. It's got a lovely feel to it. It's got a big check. It's got a warmth to it that I enjoy. And I use it regularly in terms of particularly trews. And tonight I'm going to a dinner and I will have the trews on of the Angus tartan to go there. So that would be my favourite tartan.
Yeah, that is a nice tartan. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and stories. It's been really interesting to hear. I wish you and the court a safe next few months, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Okay, all the best to you. Thank you very much.